welcome to the New Directors Coaching Initiative Summer Support Series. Today is the third webinar in our series, and we're focusing on human resource management. I'm Julie Salois-Torville, a Senior Training and Technical Assistance Associate here at the National Center for Program Management and Fiscal Operations, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by some fabulous colleagues, and I'm going to turn it over to Kathy. Kathy, can you introduce yourself and Bill?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. Thank you, Julie. I'm Kathy Wilson. I am Julie's colleague in Training and Technical Assistance at PMFO. And we are very pleased today that Bill Castellanos is joining us. Bill is an experienced Head Start director. He's going to share just a little bit about his program. And Bill is also a participant in PMFO's New Director Coaching Initiative. So we've gotten to know Bill through the initiative, and we're really pleased that he has joined us to share some voice from the field as we talk about this topic of human resources. Bill, welcome, and could you share a little bit about your program?
Yes, thank you, Kathy, very much, and welcome, everybody. My name is Bill Castellanos. I'm a Division Director of Child, Youth, and Family Services. My main office is here in San Luis Obispo in California. We operate a very large migrant and regional Head Start, early Head Start, and we also have we are recipients of 2 partnership grants here in California. So I will, during our presentation, I will then talk a little bit more about those programs and how HR plays such an important role in the whole operation, especially we have grown from the last 50 years. We're part of the original Head Start program. We've grown from 60 children to over 5,000 children at this point.
Wow, moving from 60 children to 5,000. That is quite a growth spurt, Bill. And Bill, did you say how long you've been supporting Head Start, early Head Start leadership?
I have been a director for Head Start over 32 years. I was involved the second year of Head Start when it first started as a summer program. And then I was involved as a trainer. But then in between that time, I've been in probation department and also as a mental health therapist. But then came back to Head Start 30 years ago.
Wow, so you have some great roots, deep roots in the Head Start programming. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
As we move along, we have 3 objectives that we're going to touch upon today. There's so much information in human resources, but we're going to focus on organizational structure and how that structure supports human resource requirements, how important teams are, work teams and management teams in supporting high-functioning and quality programs. And we're going to be talking about successful activities around staff onboarding, retention, and supervision, probably an area of difficulty, but one that is just so important. During our session, we'll be at 60 minutes today, we really want to hear from you. So we're going to practice and we're going to have times of interaction where we're going to ask and want to hear from you. And we're going to try to base all of our responses in our session around what we hear from you. During the session, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box on the right of your screen, and we will hopefully be able to weave those responses into our presentation. So as we're jumping right in, let's get started with our first practice. Get your fingers ready, okay? Because now I want to hear from you. Kelly, if you could pull up our chat boxes. Thanks. So we have 2 questions here. You can feel free to answer both. You can feel free to answer just one of them. But just using 1 or 2 words, a brief little phrase, what are your responsibilities specific to human resources? That's really question number 1. And then question number 2, who do you partner with? Because we know we don't do this work in isolation. Who do you partner with to support human resource management?
Great. Julie, I see that lots of folks are typing. Fantastic. Here we go.
Hiring, payroll, Securing substitutes, big deal. Insurances. The
Yes.
hiring process, so important. All that pre-work in really screening applicants, finding those qualified applicants, so important.
Folks reflecting on in their agencies, there may be a human resource department that they are partnering with on a regular basis, HR teams, great. We're talking a little bit about
see here,
that.
Kathy, partnering with a payroll company. So many times it may not be in-house, but there may be an external partner that is supporting. So that's important too.
Fantastic. Here's a partner in the Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships grant. So it's saying here that the grantee is providing their HR management. Absolutely a part of those partnerships and thinking about how are we communicating and negotiating those things. Fantastic. Lots of great responses.
It really is. And so now we can really understand when we talked in the lobby about the percentage of time spent on human resource activities. I love to hear everything. So as a Head Start director, early Head Start director, administrator, you really are wearing so many hats, and understanding all of the details that are involved are so important. Ensuring that employees know their rights and labor laws, something we're going to touch upon very briefly.
Yeah. And lots of comments about interviewing and orientation and background checks, right? That conversation around getting the right people on the bus. What are our systems for bringing people into our organization? And we'll talk about that as we talk about orientation and onboarding later in the hour. Fantastic.
Right. And who do you partner with? Jane states Policy Council, Administrative Assistants, the Board of Directors. Excellent. We do. In our leadership in the Head Start, Early Head Start programming, our partnership with the Policy Council is so important. This is excellent. So you can see we definitely partner with different people, and there's a lot to be thinking about, Kathy.
Fantastic. Absolutely. And again, Julie, reflecting back to the amount of time that you spend in your leadership role related to human resources. And when you see all these things that you're doing, it makes a lot of sense. Great.
Yeah. And I know that the last 30-some years that I've been involved, many of these things change. So all the pressure and the responsibilities of a new director, I just cannot imagine myself now, 30 years after, of all the responsibilities for a new person to be able to learn all of these. This is a big task, big job.
Bill, I am so glad you lifted that up. And you're absolutely right that as new leaders come into Head Start, thinking about all of the different information that they need to get up to date on, and, again, our conversation around partnering and knowing that you're not going to know everything right away at the beginning, and we talk about that with new directors. But it's understanding systems. We love to talk about systems at PMFO and building your supports around that. You're right, Bill. There's a lot of regulation and requirement, and we'll talk more specifically about that.
So Kelly, we can pull down that poll. Thank you so much for participating, and don't let those fingers get too quiet, because we're going to ask you to interact with us just in a few moments. Kathy.
Thanks, Julie. What a great start. Thank you all. I'm going to show a graphic here that helps us start to think about human resource management in a little bit of a systematic way. I mentioned we love systems thinking at PMFO. And as Bill started to say, especially as we're new in our leadership roles, and there are so many things that we need to begin to learn and understand at different levels. Sometimes having a graphic of how we think about different systems is helpful for us. So, our work is about people, right? Our work is about those awesome children and families, and it just makes sense, as we've reflected on from your very beginning pieces, that a lot of our time is spent around all of the different things that relate to the work around people. And this chart explains a few different pieces that we're going to talk about today, but I'll also share that after the webinar there will be resources available for you, including this chart and then some deeper dives on each of these quadrants for you to refer to. We're going to hit on a number of these topics in our hour today. Starting with organizational structure, we like to start up in that pink quadrant and working our way around to human resource requirements, and then kind of talking about the left-hand side regarding some recruitment, but really about once we get those folks on board, how do we support them and grow our organization and the skills of our staff. So again, as we think about human resources, you reflected on the time that you spent. If you think about your budget, right, that this is a big piece of all of the work that you do fiscally. It's a really important part of the work that you do to affect quality for children and families. So as we start to digest and pull this piece apart a little bit, we want to think about those things. The first section we're going to look at, the first piece we're going to look at is around organizational structure. Remember I said we kind of want to start in that upper quadrant as we think about how is our program organized? How do we organize people to support the quality work that we do? And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about our organizational structure. How do we organize people so that we have appropriate levels of oversight and supervision? And we like to divide, and you'll see that we use this technique here in our HR discussion. For you as a new leader, what are some things you need to know, do, and oversee? And we will look at these charts a couple of times with a couple different topics during our hour today. But thinking about and knowing your organizational culture. And if you're new to Head Start or new to your program, that might not be something that you understand right away. So how are you talking to people and thinking about what do we know and what can I learn about the organizational culture here? We're going to talk a little more deeply about factors that affect our organizational structure. How do we decide how we layer our supervision levels? How do we know what the appropriate levels of support and oversights are as far as things you need to know? Then there's some things you need to do, and that is around really looking at your program structure and developing a structure that's effective. As new leaders, we very often inherit a program structure as a part of a very big organization. Sometimes there are levels above us and below us, but as a new leader, that's an important thing for you to do, to look and see, is this the effective program structure we need, and is it helping us assure the quality that we have? Supervision systems, work teams, all of those things important for you as a leader to develop and to know. And then, again, in oversight, thinking about, are there changes to our organizational chart? How do we work as a team to develop that? And also, what are some of the, how do we develop our job descriptions and other organizational requirements? So know, do, and oversee regarding the program structure and some buckets to start to think about your work. And we're going to talk about a resource that was provided in your pre-webinar materials. You have a handout that talks about span of control. And span of control is a term that we use to start to think about how do we begin to consider this supervision structure? How do we begin to consider what the best organizational structure is for the needs of our program? Again, I'm going to highlight a couple pieces of that span of control activity or conversation, but you do have this as a resource. And when we're talking about span of control, it's about understanding things like the skill level of your employees. Do we have lots of folks who have been here a long time and have developed high-quality skills, or do we have a year where we have a lot of brand new line staff that are going to need different levels of supervision, and does our structure meet that need? We need to think about managers' responsibilities. What are the things we're asking our managers to do? And do we have a variety of responsibilities, and sometimes is that allowing us to provide the supervision that we need related to the skill level of the staff and the pieces that we're considering? Things like geography need to be considered. Are we an urban setting where we have lots of classrooms in one building and someone can visit a variety of classrooms in a day, or are we a very rural program? My Head Start program, where I worked for 20 years, we had an hour of driving time between some of our centers, and so that really needed to be considered. And when we thought about how we were supervising and doing that ongoing monitoring work and the supportive supervision for our teachers and our classrooms. So again, knowing that there are things to consider as you're looking at your organizational structure that help you kind of understand for yourself how you want to structure that level of supervision. Span of control. Julie is going to take us into another section of the graphic that we started with and talk a little bit about human resource requirements.
Thank you, Kathy. And you bring up something that's so important and so unique to Head Start programming, is that each grantee is really looking at their own structure and what makes sense for their design. So there's not a one way of really looking at structural aspects, and I think that that's really unique to our programming. In looking at developing a structure, there is a lot, and we're going back to that know, do, and oversee. There is so much information regarding human resource requirements. There are federal labor laws, there are state regulations, and how each of those intersect with each other. And then there's Head Start, Early Head Start regulations, or other funding sources that you may have. You may also be working with unions or collective bargaining units. All of that is going to play into how your policies are designed and how you're implementing those. So having an understanding of that is really important. And then what to do is keeping abreast of these new HR trends, requirements, and issues. And as we discussed, it's very difficult. There's a lot to do in a day. And Bill brought up a great point of, as a new leader, how do you get all of these details organized so that you're able to work with them? When I first started as a Head Start director, there were 300 staff. That is a lot of people. And I needed to keep up with the different rules and regulations, and I found some external information pieces that were supportive to me from the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM. They offer free webinars and articles, and they go over different requirements and the current trends. So for example, I went back to that in preparing for today's chat, and I just completed a webinar on the new overtime rule that will affect programming. So that was important, but I would always bring that back to my internal HR leadership and talk to them and partner with them around what does this mean for us? How does this impact our personnel policies? And if you see, what do you need to oversee? Those personnel policies are reflecting Head Start requirements, personnel records, including documentation. What do we need to be documenting? What is our standard of conduct? Are they developed? How are they being monitored? How is that standard of conduct to then go back into your structure, into those job descriptions? It's all interrelated. And if we were just to reflect back for a minute, understanding all of the rules and regulations offer a foundation so that you're able to develop policies and procedures. There is a two-page There's a two-page handout that was available to you pre-webinar on social media. And we use this as an example as our last webinar was on communication. And how do we use communication? How do we support communication within our programming? And a social media policy was discussed. This is one example of understanding the regulations and rules and requirements will allow you to build a social media policy. In the two-page handout, there was resources on the second page that can specifically help you look at your program and how your program would benefit by using social media, and consider the components of a clear social media policy. Kathy, it was a longer process than I thought when I pulled together the management team to develop how we would use social media. I remember this clearly. But in the end, all of the managers had full knowledge of why it was important, and they were foundational in communicating to all the staff and partnering with families on the use of social media. And their understanding was so important.
Julie, I think that's a great illustration of when we think about the know, do, and oversee chart that we just looked at, and your role as a leader in your program to oversee how your policies reflected requirements, or in this case, social media, things that were changing very quickly around us. And I like that you highlighted that as we talked about communication on our last webinar, this social media conversation came up. So we did want to bring you a little more information around it, and as Julie said, a nice resource for that. So as we think about, again, your responsibilities and things you need to oversee, we are real lucky that, again, we have Bill with us, and Bill is going to share a little bit with us about how in his program he does keep abreast of changing requirements and regulation in a busy Head Start organization. So Bill, we'd love to hear from you what things are working in your program.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just by hearing all the responsibilities and all the changes, sort of gets me, now I know why I go home tired. Because of all the responsibility. I had a friend of mine who's now doing consultant work. He basically said, I love my job is because I know I don't no longer have to deal with people, because that is so stressful and that is so draining. But the fact that in order to have a good program, you really need to have a good, strong team. As I mentioned before, that when I first started, we only had about 30 employees. We have over close to 1,000 employees now. And we used to have 2 part-time HR directors, and now we have 6 specialists, and where they basically specialize in a particular area, because we need that type of a teamwork in order to make sure that we're all in full compliance. As you mentioned, there's a lot of requirements in terms of, ADA, the EEO, equal employment opportunities. We have the new minimum wage that you had mentioned, also the Affordable Care Act. These are just to name a few, and the list continues to increase. Every month there seems to be some new requirements, and if you're involved with either a county or federal or any other funding sources, you have to be very familiar to some of the requirements. So I mentioned that I have about 6 specialists that sort of work on and to make us always, to make sure that we're fully compliant. So we have a person who spends all of her time basically around safety. They have safety training, they have drug testing, they have to deal with the illnesses and accidents. So they're also looking in terms of prevention, and they spend a lot of time in monitoring the type of accidents to make sure that our workman's comp are lower. Because of our efforts, we have really saved thousands of dollars, believe it or not, thousands of dollars by taking the effort to educate people in terms of safety. And then we have someone who just focuses on staffing, the hiring, the job description, updating them. And then also to make sure that we have yearly surveys to get the ideas and in terms of satisfaction of staff, because we really want to make sure that our staff are happy, their ideas and their recommendations are really welcome. Then we have someone who basically takes care of the benefits, health and dental, the vision, enrolling and disenrolling individuals to make sure that they're that we're in full compliance. We'll also make sure that we have that our performance evaluations are done on a yearly basis. And then we have one individual basically make sure that there is a data entry, make sure that there's filing is done in place. And then we also have a employee relationship, which basically helps develop and make sure that we have policies and procedures that deal with social media, that deal with any wage studies or anything that we need to make sure that staff are fully aware of. And the way I keep abreast of all of this, I'm part of a leadership team, and the leadership team is made up of the CEO, the HR person, the fiscal person. So they give us an update of any new changes in terms of the requirements and things of HR. So there is a lot, and again, I really, it's exciting work, but it is a lot of work, and you really need to go back to the original idea of having a team, a full qualified team that's also be able to assist you to make sure that there's no problems. But it is something that's very, very important, very serious. People need to make sure that they have a team that's very knowledgeable about this. We have HR teams that go to annual conferences. They have regular monthly meetings to make sure that they fully understand what's happening. And they also keep us abreast of what's happening. I think part of the idea of, because we're in such a large area, we have managers that also have to be very knowledgeable. So they have to be knowledgeable about the regulations and taking care of their staff in their particular area. We talked about, driving 1 hour to your closest site. So we have to, the closest, the furthest site that we have is 5 hours away. So if you look at California, we have programs up to Sacramento all the way down to the Mexican border. So we have a big area. And so we really have to rely on our area managers that are fully trained and also very knowledgeable about all these different regulations. So it is a big job, but it really takes a team. No one person, as I say, can really be so knowledgeable about that. You really have to rely on other people. And also one of the things that we also make sure, even though we have a good, strong team, we also make sure that we have also an attorney to make sure that we are in full compliance when we write some type of corrective action or something. We need to make sure we have also legal counsel to make sure that we are according to the law. So that's, my way we work with in terms of our teamwork. So.
Fantastic. Bill, there's so much richness in your conversation. So many things I heard related to certainly the importance of team, your systems that you have, and just to reflect and remember, Bill is from a very, very large program in California. And able to have some specialists in different areas. In a smaller program, just like Julie highlighted for us, we design our own organizational structures, and those things may look different in a smaller program, but the basic themes of having a system whereby that information is shared with management level folks and leadership teams. I heard Bill talk about the importance of that, and that ability to stay on top of the things that are changing so quickly just is a great illustration of things that can work for us regarding that piece. Bill, I love that you talked about teams, and it's a great transition to Julie, who's going to give us a little deeper dive around the teaming conversation, because, again, this work is about people, and this is how we get great things accomplished. Julie.
Thank you. As we have been discussing organizational structure and all the HR requirements, Bill, you did a fabulous job highlighting the detail that is needed. We need to also take a moment and reflect on the culture of our program or agency. And our webinar, our first webinar focused on leadership. And that really is talking about the tone at the top. It's so important. But creating an environment of learning and collaboration is so important. We briefly chatted about your partnering and collaborating with the HR and implementation of teams. Using teams supports high-quality programming. And those teams can be work teams, functional teams. It'd be working, as Bill mentioned, in a leadership team, but definitely Head Start programming lends itself to growing a team. And really this definition comes from a document in the resource called Growing a Team. Head Start has a long history of valuing teams. This document is actually available on eClick, LKC, and the team is defined as a group of people coming together to reach a shared goal or task for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Think about the many teams that are in Head Start programs. A team process allows for everybody to own its successes and sometimes little hiccups along the way. But it allows staff to really have an increased investment in the program. And that in turn creates a bigger investment in children and families. Teams could be pulled together to focus on a specific function involving all levels of staff and parents, or be a management team, as Bill had highlighted. Collaboration in a management team can really bring together a strong program. Developing a strong management team is foundational and supports high-quality programming. I needed to reflect a little bit on this myself from when I was a Head Start director. And I remember when I first started as a brand new director, I had a management team that came together on a weekly basis. And I thought, this is fabulous. We are working together to solve problems. And I really thought, okay, let's dig in. Well, my first issue was a budget issue. And those are not easy concerns to work through. So I brought it to the management team, and what I realized is they had not had a lot of opportunity to practice collaborating together. So it was so important that we talk about these budget items together, but it was really foreign to them. So I had to build in opportunities to really help the team come together, work to conclusions, and to support, and to help them find ways to be proactive. That was a difficult process, but I will say within 10 months of really practicing it and digging in with this team, we were faced with another concern, and it was around our transportation department. And we came together, and it was so wonderful. The team came and they brainstormed and they thought about opportunities of how we could work together. We did have an HR manager who came in and helped us talk about leadership in the transportation department and how we could really build this up. And we were able to come to that conclusion together. Working in partnership, we were able to look at what are our regulations, what does our program structure look like, and how can we best work together. And it was powerful and wonderful. Bill, I'm wondering, you talked about working within a team, and you're part of a management team, but that's a culture in itself. How do you really support that collaboration? I don't know if you can offer anything for us around that.
Well, you sort of hit it out. The idea of this team effort, it sounds like, some nice words. People think that it's something that we should all be doing. But again, we're dealing with individuals, and a lot of times people do not feel comfortable in an area like in transportation or in budget. But you really, I think, as a director or as a manager, you need to make sure that you include everybody in terms of decision making, because the decision making is not just one person. And sometimes individuals might feel a little bit threatened because you have other people getting into their area of expertise. You really need to be able to have the ability to have everybody knowledgeable about all their components in terms of health and transportation, social services, and also the importance of making sure that we have parents. We haven't talked about parents. That is so important and for the survival at Head Start. We need to continue identifying and involving our parents at all levels, from the hiring. Even though some people say we don't have to do that, you really need to engage them because they need to understand the culture of the program. The parents are so involved. We also need to make sure that they all work as a good, strong team. And the only way you're going to be able to do it is you open those opportunities for staff to understand budgets. So we have budget committees that are made up of all the different disciplines, and we also have parents in that. We have transportation groups that talk about transportation. So we have variety of committees to make sure that they fully understand. But as a director, it's very difficult to understand all aspects of the program. So that's why you need to make sure they have specialists that are real knowledgeable about their particular field. And you as a director, you just need to make sure that we're in compliance at all times. So the culture of the agency, having to them understand where we came from, understanding, the civil rights movement, the war on poverty. Many of my staff, they're in their 20s and 30s. They have no idea what I'm talking about. So I think they need to understand the roots of the agency, the roots of Head Start, and where it came from. So,
Bill, I love a couple pieces that you just brought forward. And first of all, reminding us to bring that awesome piece of Head Start regarding parents to the table as we're talking about teens. And, as Julie shared a little bit, and then your reflection, and really, honestly, an understanding that sometimes we're asking folks to go a little bit outside of their comfort area, but the outcome of having a variety of people involved just brings up the engagement, and we know that the more folks are involved in decision making, the better our outcomes are and the better the engagement is. So that's just terrific. And thanks again for hearkening us back to our history and really understanding some of the different demographics within our staff and understanding how important it is to include them in things that we're doing. Terrific. I'm going to move us on because we've just had this great conversation around human resource requirements. We've talked about teaming, right? I talked very briefly at the beginning about the work that we do is people-related, and we spend a lot of time getting the right folks to us and getting the right folks into our programs. And so as we finish here, we want to talk about welcoming staff and how we develop those folks in our program so that we know we have longevity. And to do that, oops, I double-clicked. To do that, we are going to get your fingers moving again. So Kelly, if you would help us, Kelly's going to pull up a chat box, and we're going to play a little Beat the Clock. So what we'd like you to think about is a time when you joined an organization, when you moved into a new role, and think about what were the things that evoked a welcoming feeling in that? Okay, think about a good experience you had. What were the things that helped you and evoked a welcoming feeling? And like I said, we're going to play a Beat the Clock here. So one words are great. It looks like you're going, Kelly. We'll take 30 seconds, and we're off. Lots of folks typing. Oh, yeah, your desk was ready when you got there, right? Think about the parallel when a child walks into the classroom and there's his picture and his cubby and your desk was ready, Jeanette. You're right. Smiles. Oh, look at that coming up so many times. Having someone spend one-on-one time with me, Heather, how important that must have been. That's terrific. Look at welcome and smiles. Oh, and there we go. Alicia gave us the red. Pretty good on the Beat the Clock. Julie, I'm just...
Kathy, this is so, I think I really love your analogy or metaphor there about a child entering into a classroom when their cubby is ready and they see a picture of themselves, but to really have a desk ready for people to know that this person is coming, right, is so important. Having someone to show you where things are, to take some time. It's really about the development of a relationship.
I was just going to go there. Look at how many of those things really involve a connection with another person, whether it's smiles or somebody to help you with something. And I think that's a great transition as we move into talking about this, how we bring folks into our organization. Look, we're still getting lots of great ideas. Around orientation and onboarding. So thank you so much. Look, smiling, saying hi, right? Just little things that mean so much. Kelly, if you will take down our chat. Thank you. That is a great step off to a frame that we have that we're starting to use to talk about as we bring folks into the organization. And I want you to take just a minute to look at these two buckets around the word orientation and around onboarding. So of the two, I think orientation is a word that we roll around and we use a lot and we're pretty familiar with. Onboarding pushes us to another level. So when in orientation, we're talking about some of the nuts and bolts of getting somebody in the door, getting the paperwork done, showing them some simple layout of the room, looking at the employee handbook. Certainly things that need to happen. But in that thought process, to also help ourselves think about the importance of this broader conversation around onboarding, where we're thinking much more about something that is helping people to assimilate. It takes place over time. It's really building the relationships that we know lead to better retention. And in the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned briefly that HR and your personnel are a huge part of your budget. And the things that we know about turnover is that it is incredibly costly, not only fiscally, but in terms of quality. So as we think about onboarding and making those relationships, we know that leads us to retention and ultimately to better quality. So here's that know, do, and oversee regarding retention, and some of the things that I just talked about. And again, these will be on your handout, but knowing about compensation and pay scale, knowing about how we do performance appraisals, developing training plans, right? How are you overseeing the development or doing the development of training plans? Modeling effective supervision, right? We know there's a parallel between how the employees and the staff treat each other in the organization and how that carries over to how everyone, including children and parents, are welcomed and treated. Thinking about succession planning, and then overseeing that supervision system, performance appraisals, compensation, and engagement. So our buckets around retention. Julie had a definition for us, and here's a definition of supervision. And, absolutely that piece about supervision that includes accountability, right? Watching and directing what someone says or how something is done. And then we took our artistic license at PMFO and added in there for the purpose of continued improvement, because we know that we're constantly building quality. So just to kind of define out supervision, thinking not only about the accountability piece of it, but how are we supervising and supporting staff for ongoing quality development. And this gives us a chance to hear from Bill, yet again, who is going to share just a little bit about that conversation. And as Bill and I prepared for this, Bill used this great term that I loved, and he said, sometimes we kind of have to grow our own. We bring folks on board, but there's lots of things that we want to support them in. And I love that term. And Bill, you want to share just a little bit about some of the things that work for you regarding that onboarding and engaging folks?
Yeah, that's, again, that's so important, the fact that you're welcoming individuals. And to make sure that the culture also reflects that, to make sure that people are truly welcome. So one of the things that we're doing, when we were 30 years ago, I would be able to maybe name everybody, and sometimes even go to classrooms that could name some of the children, have their names. But now with over, close to 1,000 employees, not just Head Start, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to, have that rapport with each individuals. But one of the things that I learned that, especially when there was so much focus with the early Head Start and the focus on 0 to 3, it was very difficult to find qualified staff. So we ended up starting classes and classes with units to make sure that people would have their units to qualify for the positions. But we had to start looking at our individuals who were our assistants, even our parents, some of the parents that were coming into the classroom, to encourage them to continue their education. And I would be very proud to say that we have over 40% of our staff in Head Start and Migrant Head Start are from our former parents. And
Bill, that's a terrific statistic.
Yeah. And also the other thing we see in terms of, we have one of the first programs that started the family daycare model. That was about 25 years ago. And now it seems to be the big thing, the big program that somehow people have discovered it. But we've been very successful with that model. And again, we go back to the individuals that are now providing services who are fully licensed, fully insured, are former migrant workers who worked in the field and now have their own little business. So again, that is also part of the culture, to try to grow your own individual, to train them, because they understand the program, they understand what we're all about, and they want to work for us. The other thing that we have done, because I'm part of a community action agency, and again, we're also celebrating 50 years, just like Head Start is celebrating 50 years of existence. We have multiple programs, weatherization, we have program for homeless, seniors, family planning, so a variety of programs. And so when we have a full day for all new employees, to introduce them to the community action agency of all their programs. So it's a full day of orientation. It also allows them to have a time that they can arrange to have sort of a tour of some of the centers or some of the programs that we have here in San Luis Obispo. So again, they need to really understand not just the scope of they're just working for Head Start or they're working for health service or senior. They really need to understand the whole comprehensiveness of the program. So one of the other things we also have been developing our website, where individuals who are interested in working, they're able to get a lot of information about the agency, about the program that they're going to be applying. We have now started taping and developing a whole series of training modules for our Head Start staff, because we're always looking for individuals. We're always, even now, we're about 2 more months before we close our migrant seasonal Head Start, and we're still in the process of trying to identify staff. Because we have several vacancies and we're not able to identify qualified individuals. So we're always recruiting, and we also need to make sure that we continue training some of the staff that we see potential in management and also potential as head teachers or supervisors. So sort of an ongoing process.
I really like your use of technology, Bill. What a great thought. And think about those things that Bill just said and back in our onboarding conversation, right? And if we're thinking about what are we doing to promote engagement, what are we doing to promote relationship, and I heard you talk about training and helping your new staff understand all the different things that are involved in the community, and lots of deep kind of engagement pieces. And as we talk again about that retention, those are the things that we know absolutely along with a fair and equitable compensation. We know that those kind of relationship-oriented pieces are what keeps staff on board, and again, that to share that we also know that there's a good connection to quality regarding that. Bill, thank you so much for your great reflections.
I also like to say, just as the agency, we have, just before our call, I called up HR department just in terms of our turnover. Last year, we had a 12.5% turnover, which is great for us because, again, it goes back to the amount of having to, the expense of trying to find people, the expense of training new people. So the 12.5% represent the entire agency, and I think that is a good reflection that we take care of our people and that they want to work for us. Even individuals like the migrant programs that might work maybe 8 months out of the year, we have great numbers of staff coming back.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Oh, Bill, what a great way to use your data and share your data. And I think your connection, your testament is exactly right. It says a lot about the investment you make in people, and that kind of drives home the point we're making here. Fantastic. A good thing to ask all new leaders, are you tracking your rates of turnover? Is that something you're paying attention to? Because again, we know that there are real fiscal and quality implications there. Bill, thank you so much for bringing that piece up. I'm going to share with you now. I'm going to click on the screen. We've been together for almost an hour. We've talked about a lot of pieces of this big conversation around human resource management, how we know that this is a huge piece of our budget and that we have really important rules and regulations, and our organizational structure is important as we consider this. And I'm going to share this nice, we call this a Wordle or a word cloud, that puts some of those words in front of you that we thought about. And as we start to wrap up, I'm going to ask Kelly to pull up a chat box for us. And we know that sometimes as you hear a lot of new information, sometimes a little spark happens. And that as we think about carrying this webinar off into your leadership life, think about anything that you might have heard that made a spark or an idea for something you might want to do moving forward to strengthen something within your HR system. And we'll take a minute just to collect those little thoughts and give you a chance to kind of give voice to that as you're reflecting on the presentation. Yeah, okay, yeah, delegating, Jan, and really using your team. Sometimes as a new leader, right, there's so much to know. There's so much to know, and to understand and trust in your team and delegate that, right? Good. Well, onboarding and time around orientation. Look at that. Lots of that last conversation. Great. I'm glad we've had that conversation again, just to get our mind thinking around all those things that Bill talked about, how we build relationship and support in an onboarding kind of way. It doesn't just happen in a day or two. We want to build those supports in over time. Good. Top-down, great. Juanita, thinking about organizational structure, fantastic. Great. Increase employee morale, do a better job with orientation. Right. That, when we thought about those welcoming conversations, right away, you were able to come up with some things about what made you feel welcome and how important that is. Great.
And Kathy, just hearing things around teamwork and communication, so important.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you for taking time to reflect on our little Wordle there, and I know your brains are are kind of swirling all this stuff around. So as we said, we've given you some resources, but we're also going to continue to share some resources with you here as we just close up really quickly. Julie's going to run us through support.
Great, and you're right. As your brain is swirling, we definitely want to leave you with resources or tools to use in your program. And hopefully you had an opportunity to look at some of the pre-webinar resources. This is a fabulous one for new leaders. I think this is a fabulous one for leaders who have been in place for a while. The Human Resource Management Scan, it really does allow you to take a peek at questions to consider, what areas should you be looking at, and really look at your own program and agency. This is a fabulous, and this would be a fabulous document to work through as a team, say in that leadership team, as Bill was referencing. Another resource is supervision resources. Again, these documents can be found on eClick, EC-LKC, and really looking at how supportive supervision and that reflective practice supports employees, it supports staff and those ongoing in professional development, in learning, in feeling as though they are a piece of this program, and an important piece. Supervision is a fabulous foundational block to staff retention. Now, I had chatted briefly around the know, do, and oversee regarding regulations. This document was also available to you. Bill talked a lot about the different types of regulations that he's had to reflect on with his human resource specialists. This document does give you some websites to keep up with the changes in regulations as far as federal laws, and then also connecting with your own state's laws. So this is a great resource to use and continually check on. As we mentioned, the social media, this is a screenshot from the second page. There's some great resources here in helping you move from understanding those foundational regulations into actually looking at policies. And the social media could be one of those policies. So this is an opportunity for you. I can't stress it enough. There are so many resources available on eClick for you, and please definitely visit the PMFO page, Learning for New Leaders, Head Start A to Z, and to be looking through how all of these connected. We talked about leadership today. We talked about communication. There's so many different opportunities. More importantly, I want to thank you for joining us for this hour. Bill, I want to thank you. Kathy, thank you so much. And if you have any questions or any other follow-up that you would like, please feel free to contact PMFO at the number that you see there on your screen, or through our PMFO coaching email. Please fill out our brief evaluation, and you'll be able to print out a certificate of participation. Thank you so much for joining us today.